Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, What to Know About Hazardous Area Classification Tool, presented by Stuart Powell. BakerRisk has decades of experience completing incident investigations, loss prevention studies, testing and research, and risk management services. We're excited to showcase in today's webinar a software solution to streamline the completion and effectiveness of hazard area classification studies. Now, for today's webinar, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. First, we have posted links in the chat to content related to our webinar subject. We invite you to explore BakerRisk's published papers, previous webinars, and BakerRisk Training Center courses. Second, we want to respond to your questions following this webinar. Please type questions into the Q&A box in the Zoom control panel, and our presenters will respond to the questions. Finally, at the close of our webinar today, please provide feedback by responding to our survey. And now for the webinar, Stuart Powell will introduce and showcase the new HACTool software. Stuart is a process safety engineer in the BakerRisk Houston office with experience completing HAC studies, facility siting studies, and PHAs. And we are excited to have him here to present this afternoon. So without further ado, I will turn the time over to Stuart.
Excellent. Thank you, Naomi. I appreciate that introduction. And thanks everyone for being here and joining us for today's webinar topic on what to know about the BakerRisk Hazardous Area Classification Tool, or HACTool for short. I'm excited to be here to showcase this software with you and to take you through the software so you get a firsthand look at it and then can decide if you want to license it out for your needs on the business purposes. So with that, let's get into the webinar. And just a foreword before we get started this afternoon. What you see in front of you is an agenda of what we plan to cover for this webinar. But before we dig into it, just a step back real quick. This webinar is going to focus specifically on HACTool itself, so the software application program. And it's not really going to dig into hazardous area classification at large, the bigger picture. That is outside the scope of this webinar and this training, if you will. But there are some resources that Naomi alluded to that are presented in the chat window if you're more interested in HAC in general. And then we'll also talk a little bit at the end on some additional resources that BakerRisk has in regards to hazardous area classification, how to conduct a study, what you should be looking for in a HAC audit, and other sorts of hazardous area classification topics. But again, this webinar will focus specifically on the software itself. And so with that, with the short hour that we have together here for this webinar, we plan to go through pretty briefly and at a high level, just an introduction to HACTool, some of the background and why it was created. We'll talk a little bit about the application for where HACTool really shines in regards to meeting your hazardous area classification needs and how you can use the software to help with hot work permits, etc. Whoever really gets hands-on experience with HAC at your operating facility or consultancy. And then the majority of our time today is going to be on the software demonstration. That's probably going to take up about really 30 to 40 minutes as we'll actually open up HACTool and we'll start from the ground up, just creating a new file, see what's involved in adding inputs to the file, and then generating those reports at the end of the day, being able to generate a specific classified area report in a desired location. And after that 30 to 40 minutes of the software demonstration, we'll be talking a little bit about, with the remaining time, future developments. HACTool is a software program that's ever changing and ever growing. So we'll talk a little bit about future developments that are coming down the pipe. Also pricing and downloading. So where you can download and license and how much that would cost if you're interested. And then I'm really going to try for, at the end of the presentation, to leave 5 to 10 minutes to answer some of your questions about HACTool. Again, this is a software that BakerRisk is opening up to the industry. And so really like to get to your questions and start answering them in regards to the software itself. And of course, if we run out of time today and we just don't get to all the questions, we'll create a list of all the questions that we didn't get to, and then we'll follow up via email later on in the week or next week. So that's our agenda for today, for this next hour. And so let's get into it. So what is HACTool, or Hazardous Area Classification Tool? I'm sure you've seen plenty of news blasts on LinkedIn from BakerRisk and maybe a few email blasts on this webinar showcasing the release of HACTool. Well, HACTool is a software package that has been developed by BakerRisk and has actually been used by us for a number of years now as we conduct HAC studies for our clients, be it classifying areas, creating the classification contours, or be it an audit of electrical equipment on site. BakerRisk has been using HACTool for a number of years for these purposes on the projects that come our way. And really, what it is, it was meant to assist designers, engineers, contractors, operators, consultants, really whoever needs to know about hazardous area classification, ignition sources out in the field, and purchasing equipment, and for the purpose of classifying areas, calculating that extent distance to our classified boundaries, determining what classification they are, class 1, div 1, 2, group A, B, C, D, etc. As well as it serves a purpose of reporting gaps in electrical equipment suitability for classified areas. So HACTool is really neat, and we'll see it here in a second in the fact that it can calculate those extent distances, but you can also add in ignition sources to see if your electrical equipment in a desired area is suitable for the area that it is in. So it really is a tool for you to use and the user to use to help kind of guide you through and help organize your thoughts on this hazardous area classification studies at your facilities. And so it is a tool at the end of the day, so it by no means can substitute for a knowledge of hazardous area classification, some of the standards and guidelines that go into a study, but it is a tool to help kind of through that process and organize the data in one concise location. And so highlighting some of the main features of HACTool, I've kind of alluded to these already, but drilling down a little bit deeper. HACTool has the ability to calculate this classified area boundaries and characteristics, so distances to our classified areas. It has the ability to determine if electricals are suitable based on industry standards, such as the National Electrical Code, FPA 70 and FPA 497. It has the ability to generate very detailed and very specific HAC drawings for HAC work and permits and et cetera. So it's really neat and really interesting. You can zoom into a specific processing unit, maybe that you want to get a more detailed look at the classification in that area, and you can actually export a report based on that specific set of equipment, maybe that specific unit, or if you want to zoom out, you can create a overall report based on your inputs, hazardous area classification report of the facility as a whole. So you got a zoomed in view, a zoomed out view, and you can create both of those reports, which we'll see here during the demonstration, with just a click of a few buttons. And it really is pretty customizable in regards to those reports, which you'll see here shortly. And I'm a pretty organized guy, so at least I like to think so. So I like programs that help me store large amounts of information with very easy and very minimal effort on my part. And so if you're organized or not, HACTool helps in that process of organizing and storing a large amount of process information and process equipment, maybe where pumps are located, where heat exchangers are located, and some of the temperatures and pressures surrounding that equipment, such that you need that input to calculate the classified area boundaries, at least if you're using NFPA 497, as well as all the electrical equipment in the fields that could pose an ignition source at the end of the day, right? So that's all vital information to know and to store in HACTool if you choose to use it for that purpose. And so drilling down a little bit deeper into one of the highlights and main features of HACTool, again, is calculating that extent distance to the classified areas. And so if you're familiar with HAC, you might be aware of a few different approaches in industry for getting that classified area boundary that you see on the drawings that you use on a daily or weekly basis. And really, there's two main approaches. There are others out there, but approach one to classifying an area is what I like to call the blanket approach. And then the second approach is the point source approach. And kind of the name gives it away for the difference between the two approaches. The blanket approach, it looks at an area, just real briefly, maybe a pump alley, And it looks to determine what is the most conservative classification for that pump alley or that area. And it'll blanket the entire area with that conservative approach, which has its usefulness and its purposes. But standards such as NFPA 497 call out other approaches, such as the point source approach, which will take the individual pumps or individual release sources in a given area and apply the standoff criteria or guidance to calculate from that each individual point what is the distance to the classified area, and to generate an area boundary around that specific equipment. So two different approaches here. HACTool has the ability to do both, to do the blanket approach, to blanket an entire area if that's what you wish, but it really shines in the ability to get those specific release sources in there to calculate a more tailored contour to your facility, right? And so we know if you have a more tailored contour, that can lead to a reduction in capital costs, as now your classified areas might shrink as it conforms to your specific layout and your specific processing unit, as opposed to the blanket approach, which coats the entire area, which may result in more maintenance costs, more capital costs. So again, HACTool has the ability to do both approaches, but it really shines that point source approach, leading to reduction in capital cost and maintenance costs. Some specific applications before we get to the software side of things. For HACTool, it really can be used in a variety of settings for a variety of purposes. And what we've done here is just highlighted the top 4 that come to mind in regards to using HACTool for your hack needs. And the first being design work. So if you're working on a greenfield study, maybe you're have a few different layouts of a unit that you're looking to build, a few different plot plans, and you want to know, hey, what is the classified area using that point source approach boundaries for the different equipment in the facility and based on the different plot plan layouts. So HACTool gives you the ability to move and shift things around, to really build these custom units and to quickly calculate an overall view of the classified area that you're working with. So really useful for design work, and BakerRisk has been involved in numerous greenfield studies related to that. It's also, its usability and feasibility is good for process changes. So maybe you're making a change to a unit and you want to know how this quickly affects the classified area boundaries, such that you need to know if you need to order different equipment for your process change, or if the equipment that you have coming in a few weeks or a few months is rated for the area that it's in. And so with just a few clicks of the button, changing out some of the inputs, you can see how process changes affects your classified area boundaries, and also in regards to adding new electrical equipment in the area. And that kind of ties into number 3 there, the electrical audit. So determining if existing or proposed electrical equipment is suitable for the area that it's in. And so HACTool has the ability to quickly generate tables for electrical equipment that may be out of compliance or may be damaged in a classified area, which we'll see in the software demonstration. And then number 4, we've alluded to reporting and documentation, really developing these customizable hack drawings that you can zoom in and get the specific view of what you're looking for a classified area, as a real neat and useful feature coming out of the software. So in just a moment, we'll turn to the software itself, and we're really going to be stepping through what we call this layered approach for calculating our hazardous area boundaries, and then determining if our electrical equipment is suitable for our area, and then generating that report at the end of the day. And so this is the process that we'll be going through in the HACTool software. We're going to start at the bottom. We're going to import a map, and for our purposes, it's going to be a JPEG image of the BakerRisk test facility that we perform actual propane releases and other tests for industry. So we're going to import a map of that facility. You can also import DWG files. So if you have a DWG of your facility or a process unit, you can import that into HACTool, and then HACTool will actually generate the contours overlaid on your DWG out of the software. That's one of the features. So we'll import that map, step 1. Step 2, we start adding our chemicals and our streams. So we'll add our propane, hydrogen, group D and group B materials, and we'll start defining our streams in accordance with NFPA, small, medium, and large size releases. Step 3, once we have both of those in there, we'll start locating some release sources. So in our example, we'll have a pump seal leak of propane and maybe a gas cylinder of hydrogen. And we'll calculate what those extent distances are from those releases. Step 4, we'll add in a couple of buildings, some example buildings and some stack locations. You know, building stacks are important to know where they're located in your facility, or specifically in regards to hazardous area classification. And step 5, we'll add electrical equipment just to show the ability of HACTool to assess those and generate a report showing compliance or not compliance of our electrical equipment. And of course, step 6 will generate reports on all this, and then we'll proceed with our presentation. So with that, let's open up HACTool and see it firsthand. I'm gonna go ahead and open the application here. And again, this section should be about 30 or 40 minutes. And then on the tail end of this, we'll get into feature developments and pricing, and then some additional resources on HAC. So whenever you open up HACTool for the first time, this is what you see in front of you. And so it's a blank screen, and essentially just kind of talking through the different areas that you see at a high level. In this middle section, this will be our map area that we're going to add to the software. So this is what we're going to be working with, the interface wise. So our map's going to go here in just a second. Over here on the left side, we have some quick access buttons that will allow us to move the map around, zoom into different locations, see our HAC contours and our release sources in 2D and 3D formats. Move objects on the map real quick and just with a click of a button here on this left side. Over here on this right side is our object addition bar. And so we'll be using this shortly to add a building to the file, add a release source, and add our ignition sources. And so with just a click of a button over here, we'll be able to select what kind of object we want to add, and then click on our map where we want that object to be located. And up here at the top, we have some detailed information on all the different inputs and outputs and options and parameters of HACTool that we'll kind of talk through at a high level. But again, the purpose of this demonstration is just to highlight the usability and feasibility of HACTool. And then, of course, a more detailed look at HACTool will come with the training videos that can be provided with this software. So I'm going to go ahead and come up here to File and click on New File. And we're just going to create a new file saying webinar example. And then we'll come down here and click save. So as soon as I click save there, HACTool is going to prompt me to fill in some logistical information about the file that I'm working with. And so it's asking for a site name, site owner, and site number. So I'm just going to fill in some examples here. Example name. Example owner, and site number. If you have multiple facilities that you're working at or across your company, you can, and if each one has a different site number, you can add that here. And then this notes section, I really like it. If I'm working with colleagues in the office, I can write a note to them saying, hey, last time I updated this HACTool file was, you know, October 29th, and I can write my change notes here. So this notes section is really good for documenting changes to the file, or maybe leaving a reminder for you on wherever you left off on your development. So we'll just put development notes here. And then some other parameters that are available right when you open HACTool. Default units, HACTool can work in English and metric, classification type, division and zone, and study type, NFPA. So we'll go ahead and click save on that. And so the first step, if you remember our layered approach, is to add in that map. So we're going to go ahead and come up here to maps and click on new map. And HACTool is going to ask, where's the map that we want to add? And so I'm going to navigate on my computer to my example map here. Just go ahead and click open. And we'll leave the name of the map alone and the description alone. But if you wanted to document anything about the map that you're adding, you could add that here. We'll press OK. You'll see as soon as I press OK there, it overlays that map into HACTool. And it's going to ask me some questions on, you know, the scale of the map and then where I want to set my origin, my 0, 0 location on the map, such that all of my new objects that I add, my sources, my buildings, will be all in reference to that scale and that location. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly walk through this. This is just me setting up the map. I'm telling HACTool where north is. And I'm setting my scale. I know that this building is about 200 feet. It's actually about 196 feet. So I'll set my scale by clicking on 2 different points, saying 196. And then HACTool will ask for that last bit of information, the coordinate. So I'll go ahead and set my coordinate, my 0, 0 point at the top left corner of that building. So now my map is populated. HACTool does have the ability to for you to add multiple maps. So if I had a map that was, let's say, just a very zoomed in view of this building, I could add a second map to the file. And if I wanted to change in between maps, it's as easy as coming to this drop down list and then clicking on the map that I wanted to see. And so by adding the 2 different maps, by selecting that coordinate system and that scaling system, you can overlay the maps on top of each other. So you can have a map of your entire facility and then maybe a map of a specific processing unit overlaid on each other, such that changes to one map also apply to the other with just a few clicks of the button. And then again, as a reminder, you can add DWGs to the file, but for our purposes today, we'll just be looking at JPEGs. So that's our map. That was step 1 in the layered approach. And again, we're working up to being able to calculate our classified area boundaries and being able to add electrical equipment and to determine based on the inputs if the electrical equipment is rated for the area. So step 2 was to add our materials and streams. I'm going to come up here to components. I'm going to come down here to add. And HACTool brings up this enormous list of all the chemicals that are available to add to the database for this project. So for our purposes, we're just going to search for propane. You'll see whenever I search for propane, HACTool does its best to try to find the material that I'm looking for. So this top one, just pure normal propane, is what I'm going to add to the file. But we also added this synonym column, such that if there's another material that might go by propane as a common name or an uncommon name, it also brings up those to help me find the material that I'm looking for. And as soon as I have that, I just press select. I'm good to go. And then for our purposes, we'll add hydrogen as well. We'll just add normal hydrogen and click save here. You'll see as soon as I add those materials to HACTool, it automatically brings in and populates a lot of the parameters for the material, such as if it's flammable, molecular weight, boiling point, flash point, auto ignition, and then for HAC purposes, the MESG and MIC ratio taken from NFPA 496. So all that data, large amount of data gets populated there with our stream components that we added. So those are 2 materials that we'll be working with. I'll go ahead and press save. Press OK. And now, if you think about hazardous area classification, the size of your release is very important, right? So NFPA 497 calls out your cutoffs for small, medium, and large. And right now, we've added our components that we're working with. And now we'll come up to streams and click on that to start adding and defining our streams that we'll use in the software. So these streams are, loss of containment at your processing conditions. So it's a stream on a process flow diagram or a heat material balance. And talking through this briefly, we have the name of the stream. Each stream needs a unique identifier, as well as the temperature, pressure, and maybe flow rate if it's a flowing stream, to help HACTool define that size of release. And of course, the composition over here on the right side. And so I'm going to go ahead and define propane large, for our example. Just give it some theoretical conditions to showcase the software. I know that NFPA 496 cuts off a large release at 500 pounds. So I'm going to define my pressure at 501. My composition will be propane. And then as soon as I do that, I can come down here to the bottom left and click calculate stream. And then you'll see as soon as I do that, based on the inputs I provided, HACTool calculates vapor pressure, flash point, auto ignition, the T rating based on auto ignition for equipment, MESG, and ultimately getting down to that group, that class, and the NFPA rating there at the bottom. And then as soon as that's done, I can come over here and just click save, and it saves that stream. And we'll go ahead and add a hydrogen stream as well to showcase the group of B material. Now, HACTool can handle mixtures, so it's not just pure components. It can handle mixtures as well. So it uses Chatelier's principle and others to take your mixtures And based on the MESG and MIC ratios, calculate that for the overall mixture. And we get our group B here and our large release still for hydrogen. So we'll save and close that. If at any point I want to go back and change the information that I've already added, it's as easy as coming up here to streams again, and then clicking on the stream that I want to modify and just making that change. Alternatively, there's the streams table button that I can see a table of all the streams I've added to the software, just at a click of a button here. So we're building up to the ability to calculate those extent distances. We've added our map, we've added our materials. Now becomes the fun part of adding our release sources. And so I'm going to come over here to the right side and say add point release source. It's as easy as coming here and then clicking the location on the map for where I want that release to occur, or where that equipment is located in the field. And so I've got a field here, just a general field, and I'm going to click at a random point. And you'll see as soon as I click indicating what location I want, the HACTool software brings up this source input screen. And so this is all of the information that pertains to modeling this release such that we can calculate that classified area. So at the top, I'm going to give my release source a unique name. So this is going to be propane large release. I can specify what type of release it is, if it's from a pump seal, a compressor seal, control valve, relief valve, vessel, cooling tower, storage tank, gas cylinders. And basically based on this type of equipment that I'm modeling, HACTool will see the inputs, and based on the guidance, NFPA 496, it'll calculate the extent distances and give me the side view that I'm looking for based on the equipment type that I'm working with. So for this purpose, I'm going to say it's a pump seal release. In my stream, I'm going to go pull that theoretical propane large release condition. Tag number is a good way to document what specific pump you're working with. So maybe it's P100, let's say. So you can add the tag number for the pump. PFD, you can record what PFD sheet it's in, or P&ID sheet. And HACTool will create a database of all the PFDs and P&IDs that you add such that you can quickly reference it. Description, you can document maybe the name of the pump that you're modeling. So maybe bottoms pump P100 seal leak as a description, or something to tell others what specific release you're looking at. Reference, we can add reference points if you have different elevations of interest. So you can add grade, you can add your own reference point and divide your own reference point. So maybe you have a process structure that has 3 stories. You could say third story and define the elevation of that. Delta Z is the elevation relative to that release point. You'll see our X, Y, and Z coordinates are all populated based on that click of a button on the HACTool menu, or on the map itself. Then exhaust location, I can choose between building and open air. We're in a field for this example, so we'll keep it at open air. And that's all that HACTool really needs to start calculating that extent distance. But for documentation purposes, you can, in this observations tab, add specific notes related to the release source, and maybe a photo of the specific pump that you're modeling this release source from. So that's just more ways to document the release in the software. We'll go ahead and press save. And I'm going to quickly run through adding in the hydrogen source. Very similar process. We'll call this hydrogen large. And we'll go ahead and call this one a gas cylinder. And we'll pick our hydrogen stream. We'll leave all this blank for now. And for vessel tank, we have to give it a dimension. And so we'll just say 5 by 5 by 5 for our example purposes, and click save. All right, now we've got our point release sources that we're looking at calculating our extent distances from. The last step before we generate that contour is to define what specific classified area boundary we want to calculate. By that, I'll come up here to options and under contours. And so HACTool has the ability for you to choose specifically what division, group, class, material that you want to draw the contour for, right? So we're working with propane, class D, and hydrogen, class B. And so I could lump those all together in one contour and say class 1, div 1, div 2, B, C, D. But for our purposes, I'm going to go ahead and add a second category type here and say class 1, group B only. And so for this second set, it's only going to be group B. And then for this first set, it's only going to be group C. And then I can come over here to this palette and click on that and specifically specify the HAC pattern that I want this contour to be and the color. So we're saying for class 1 div 1 in this first group, it's going to be this hatch and this color. Class 1 div 2 is this hatch and this color. And similarly for the second one, we have a different hatch. We'll go ahead and give it a different pattern there. All right, so that's all that we need to start calculating our classified areas. So I'm going to come up here to contours and click on classification. You'll see as soon as I click on classification, HACTool is going to ask what release sources do you want to consider in this drawing of the classified areas. And so you have the ability to select specific release sources. Maybe you're curious about the area, and you're curious about a specific release source, if it's driving the extent distance or not. You can come in here and click on specific sources to see their individual contributions. Or with a click of a button in the top left corner, you can say, hey, I want to see all my sources in the file, and click OK. And then as soon as you do that, it's going to ask for what contour sets you want to include. So that's the parameters that we just defined. We say we'll add our class 1 group CD and our class 1 group B division 1 and 2. We'll click save. And as soon as you do that, HACTool runs through the calculations, it looks at the inputs, and it generates the classified area boundaries. It gives you your legend here on the bottom right, and you can see the classified area that is being drawn using that point source approach using NFPA 497. And now let's say, you know, top-down view is good, but a side view and a 3D view is great. And so we can come over here to 3D, click on it. And it shifts the map and it shifts the contours to a 3D space. And I can use my mouse to move around, to zoom in and zoom out, and to get a closer view of the classified area that is being drawn in accordance with what, the standard that you're working with. But for now, I'm going to go back to 2D. I can right click and come over to measure distance if I was curious about the distance of the contour. I can start from my point release to my end release. And you see, you know, that's roughly 100-foot contour using the large release size coming out of NFPA 496. If I wanted to, let's say I added the release source to the wrong location, or I wanted to quickly move it. To move a release source is as easy as coming down here to the bottom left and clicking on this Move Object button. So I could click on that and then click and hold my release and move it to a new location. Can also copy and move. So let's say I defined my release source and I wanted to quickly make a copy of it. Maybe I had like 12 pumps in a row and you didn't want to click and manually do that for each and every pump. This copy and move will allow you to quickly do that exercise there. Can also, if you're curious about a release source that you see in front of you, you can come here to this Edit Objects button. You can click on the release source and it quickly pulls up the inputs and parameters for that release, and you can modify all that information here. Alternatively, you can come to data, and just as we had a full table of streams, we can also see a full table of sources by clicking on sources. And so clicking on view sources, you can see all the sources and their inputs into the model all in a table format that you can easily copy grid and then paste it into Excel for easy exporting. And then maybe you have 100 different sources that you want to add, and you have an Excel sheet that has all the inputs populated and you're ready to go. Clicking on this Add by Spreadsheet button will allow you just to quickly copy and paste from Excel. And then a click of a button, you can add all the release sources to the map that you're working with. So a lot of usability in terms of modifying the data that you add and then generating that classified area contour at the end of the day. Now the second step was the next step was to look at buildings. And so HACTool, you can add buildings by coming over here to the right, clicking on the Add Building button, and just clicking a few locations and dragging my cursor over. I can define my building location. I can give the building a unique name, specify if it's a compressor shed, control room, analyzer building, which does affect the contours that are drawn to some degree. Or if it's another building, if it's not in our list here, you can always say it's a different type of building. Give the building a description, a tag. But ultimately, some key parameters in regards to HAC is the building vapor tight, meaning the walls are vapor tight. And so I can specifically select what walls are or are not vapor tight, which will impact the contour that is being drawn, right? So if you have a release indoors or outdoors, it's important to know if your walls are vapor tight to see if that extent distance is going to go outside the building or not for your classified area boundaries. There's inputs for ventilation. Does the building have adequate ventilation based on the standard that you're using? And then some documentation fields for if it's a separate ventilation system, and if you know the source of air, if it's louver or air intake. If there are release sources in the building, that's important to know. And so by choosing some of these parameters to document the building, you can select yes or no in regards to hazardous area classification. Pressurization, is the building pressurized? And if so, where's the stack if it's using a stack? Positive pressure is confirmed. So that's big for crediting pressurization in hazardous area classification. Gas detection also, if you have gas detection, you can add information there. Observations, if there's damage to any parts of the building. So a really good documentation system in regards to keeping your buildings highly documented in regards to hazardous area classification. And also pictures, if you want to add pictures of defects or the building at large, that can be done here too. Go ahead and X out of that. I will mention you can also add the building stacks just by coming over here to saying add building stacks. You can add a stack to that building. The last input that we had were the ignition sources, right? So coming over here to the right, we can add an ignition source. And we'll go ahead and add one just at ground level for our hydrogen area. I'm going to click on that classified area and the ignition source input screen comes up. And so we have our classified area boundary. Now we're curious, is this, we'll use a switch for our example, is this switch actually rated for the area that it's in? And so similar to release sources, we have a variety of different electrical components that we could add and equipment that we can add. For now, we'll just stick with electrical switch. And the unique name that we'll give it is, we'll say non-compliant because of the group that it's in. That'll be the name that we'll be looking at. Tag number, we can add a tag if we wanted to. Manufacturer, if you wanted to add that. Model number, if you knew it. And you can even document if the tag or the label is missing, unreadable, or inaccessible. So for now, we'll keep it at unreadable. Certification, third party or none. And then this is all related to elevation, and you can even specify where this piece of equipment is in the field. The classification input, this tells the software what classification, class, division, group the equipment is rated for. So you can click on class 1 div 2, class 1 div 1, and then specify what specific group the equipment is rated for. And so we just dropped it into class 1 div 2 group B area. And we're going to say it's only rated for C and D, let's just say, for theoretical purposes. And we'll just click on some of the other inputs there, mainly for motors and others. But for this electrical switch, we'll just say it's CD. If there's any observations that you have about the switch, maybe it's damaged wiring, you can select that all here. You can always add your other observations. And of course, any notes for documentation purposes, and then a photo. Photo is pretty important when it comes to calling out specifically what electrical equipment you're referring to. So again, just a recap here, we're adding a switch, a theoretical switch. We're saying it's rated for class 1 div 2, group C and D. We place it in group B area, and we'll just see how the software looks at that here in a second with reports. So that's the input side of thing. Now is the moment you've probably been waiting for. You know, the inputs are great, moving stuff around is great, but at the end of the day, what do the reports look like coming out of HACTool? And so what I'm going to come up to here is this tab on reports. I'm going to click on contours. And so HACTool is going to ask me, what area do I want to look at? So I'm going to add a new report area. I'm going to cover this, the two release sources that we have. We're going to define a new report area and say create report. The first thing HACTool is going to ask is, where do you want to save this report, of course. So we'll come to HACTool and we'll say webinar example report, press save. And it's going to ask me what contour sets I want to look at. So if I just wanted the Group B materials and just report on Group B, I could select that. But for our purposes, we're going to include both Groups C, D, and B. The next step I can come over here is to the notes. I can add notes to the report that I'm generating. So if I click on add and then bring this screen over, I can say this is note 1. And I can add another saying this is note 2. It's on a separate screen. And I can quickly select, HACTool creates a database of all the notes, so I can quickly select what notes I want to add to my report. Revision history, I can give it a revision history if that's useful information. Drawing number, say 1, say example title, revision A. We can add revision history here by saying revision number, maybe 2. Give it an author, a reviewer, and then a description. Project number, and then the dates of the revision. We'll just say that for our purposes. And then logos, if you had logos you wanted to add to your report, you could add that here, but we're going to skip that for our purposes. And so once all that information is filled out, we can just come down here and press save. HACTool will generate that report. You'll see it was buffering and it says finish creating report. I'm going to come to my files and open up the report that comes out of HACTool. And you'll see this is the report that was auto-generated based on those few clicks of a button. Looking at it briefly, we have our map of our classified area, as well as our legends and our scale. Up here at the top, we're working with Hazardous Area Electrical Classification, and then we have our example name. This was our site name and our site owner that we developed at the beginning. These were the notes that we added. And this is the stream information regarding the release sources that are contained within this view. So we have our hydrogen, showing the auto ignition and the T rating for equipment in the area in order to comply with that auto ignition temperature of both hydrogen and propane. And then moving down, we have our side views coming out of the standard. So the software is looking at that gas cylinder hydrogen release and saying that this is the logic that is being used in the software, and the side view coming from the NFPA 497 standard. And you'll see that the extent distance of 15 and that 3D view matches with the side view. And that large pump release, this is the side view that HACTool was using for that one. And of course, at the bottom, we have our drawing number, our title, our revision, and the revision history that we added there and that we could always add more to. And this file is HTML, and so I can scale it if I wanted to increase the size of the map or decrease the size of the map. And ultimately, once I've settled on the size and the parameters there, I can export it and print it out and give it to someone who's performing electrical work in the area, let's say, for instance. So real customizable and real specific to desired areas that you're looking for. Again, I could have very well defined my area here to be the entire facility. It could have been just this pump itself. So really customizable when it comes to generating this report out of HACTool. So go ahead and close that. So that was the contour report, right? Which is one of the main deliverables at the end of the day for a HAC study. Some of the other things that you'd be interested in and that we discussed are the electrical equipment rated for the area, and is there a button that gives me a list of all the defects, let's say, in the model. So that's what these other reports seek to do. There's T rating, that auto ignition temperature alignment. So looking at your electrical equipment and what T rating you gave it in reference to the material that's in the area. There's the ignitions reports, which we can showcase that one real quick. Again, it's asking for the contour sets, and it's asking for what ignition sources I want to include. And then what it does is it generates this table showing my electrical source name that I've included, the type, some of the inputs, and then ultimately giving me what compliance data did I list for this ignition source. So we said it was a class 1 div 2 in a CD environment, and it's in an area class 1 div 2 group B for hydrogen. And then there's a few defects here that we listed: damaged and damaged wiring, and then the label was unreadable. So you can imagine just briefly a large study with lots of ignition sources, and then using this click of a button to see which ignition sources are in classified areas and maybe they're not rated for it, or maybe there's a defect that needs to be addressed. And if you just wanted to see the labels and the defects that were missing or reported, you could come up here to labels and say, give me a table that shows the labels that are missing, inaccessible, or unreadable, and what area that electrical source is in. Similarly, with defects, you could run that report, generate a table for all my ignition sources that have missing enclosure bolts, not pressurized, damaged wiring, etc. So real easy to generate the reports out of HACTool. And then other features, you can turn sources on and off, buildings on and off if you're looking at specific things. Control F will allow you to specifically zoom in on a specific release source. So you have the entire processing facility and you know what equipment you're looking for. It's as easy as Control F, and the software would take you specifically to that release location there. And then options, parameters, units. I can change the size of the files that you add, and then the contour sets. Again, you can customize different contour sets there. So hopefully this highlights, how easy it is to use. And of course, we've been developing it, so I say easy to use in quotation marks. There's a slight learning curve, but once you get through that learning curve, it's as easy as these clicks of buttons to generate these customizable HAC reports. Again, to zoom in on specific areas and to generate a report with just a click of a button and turn it into 3D and even look at the model from a 3D perspective there. And the last thing I'll mention before we go back to the presentation and we finish with our remaining objects is if you wanted to see a cross-sectional side view of your release, HACTool does have the ability to look at it from a side view, and it looks like I might have clicked on the wrong location there, but you can look at in the software a side view of the HAC contour if you wanted to quickly see a side view without generating the report. So with that, let's go back to the presentation and talk about future developments and other things that are coming online for HAC. So as was mentioned before, we're releasing HACTool today for your licensing purposes. And just like any software, we're always looking to improve and make HACTool even better for future users down the line. And so some future developments that are in the works and coming online in the future. One is the functionality of additional standards. So adding in capability to assess NFPA 499, API 500, and even some of the European standards. Getting those into HACTool just allow for even more assessing and generating of reports based on what standard you use in your facility. Also working on the ability to add custom contours. So maybe you like the guidance and the standards in NFPA 497 and others, but you want the ability to click on specific points and really create a custom user-generated contour. That's something that we're working on if you want to add that based on your engineering judgments. You can modify the HAC software as is, so you can create different shapes using the different outputs out of HACTool, but streamlining that process for a very customizable click-by-click basis is something that we're looking at. Number 3 there, the ability to fully auto-generate a report. So that's a Word document out of HACTool. So maybe you like the DWGs that are coming out and you like the hazardous area classification reports, but maybe you want a Word document that gives a brief summary, a brief of the inputs, a brief summary of the background and the work that was done. Maybe you're adding in a specific processing unit and you want to do this sensitivity study on what the hazardous area classification would look like, but you don't want to type up a Word document, right? You want to focus on the technical details. And so one of the things we're working on is the ability to export to a Word document, a full report out of HACTool. And of course, number 4, opportunities for improvement. So like I said, it is a software package that's always growing and we're always looking to improve it. We've been using it for the last 10 years or so, and we've been adding in some feedback from the clients that we work with in regards to hazardous area classification. And so some of their ideas were contributed to this HACTool release. And so just opportunities for improvement, hearing back from y'all to see how we can improve HACTool and make it even better down the road. In terms of pricing and downloading, that's also an important question I'm sure you have. HACTool, we're offering 1 week free trial. So that's a free trial of the full package of Hazardous HACTool. And so you can download it, you can play around with it, modify the inputs, test it at your facility, add in those DWGs, start calculating those classified areas and running those reports on electrical compliance to see how it runs, how it feels. And so we're offering that 7-day, 1 week free trial. And then after that, if you like HACTool and you think it's worth keeping around, there's licensing options for 3 months for $3,000, 6 months for $5,500, and then 12 months for $10,000. And all this information and where to download can be accessed at that link that you see at the bottom of your screen there. So, of course, if you have any questions on this, feel free to reach out for discussion. And so that's mainly it when it comes to HACTool itself. So again, this webinar was focused specifically on HACTool and the software, and we touched on elements of hazardous area classification. But if you want to really know more about HAC and you want to learn more of the nuts and bolts and the technical details, BakerRisk does have some resources available that are linked here and that are in the chat window. There are additional webinars at bakerrisk.com/webinar. And these range in various topics from HAC to explosion testing and all sorts of different service areas that BakerRisk operates in. And there is 1 or 2 on there on HAC. I believe there was a previous webinar in November given by my colleagues Dave Weschler and Austin Thomas on hazardous area classification. We also have a best practice document that we released not too long ago on best practices for HAC, conducting a study at a high level. It's a few pages long, what to think about, what to include, what to consider. So that can be accessed at bakerrisk.com. And then there's a training course that we're working on developing at our BakerRisk Learning Center coming in hopefully 2023, where we'll open up a course to really get into the technical details of hazardous area classification. Again, this webinar focused on software. So that training course would really get into how do we conduct a HAC study? What's important? What do I need to know at the end of the day such that I can go back to my facility and start discussions on that, and maybe get into some discussions on that if you're a process safety professional. And of course, the last resource there is always your BakerRisk contact. We're always here to help answer questions on this topic and other topics. Maybe you're working with a project manager on a facility siting study or a fire and gas study, and you want to know more about HAC, just reach out to them, talk to them about it. They may push you my way, they may push you to some other subject matter experts that we have in office. So don't be afraid to reach out, and we're happy to talk to you about HAC from there. And so that concludes the webinar. I hope this was useful in showcasing HACTool, its usability and functionality. And with the remaining time that we have left, looks like we do have a few minutes left. I'd like to hear from y'all and hear what your questions are to answer them from my perspective.
Thank you, Stuart. I'm going to go ahead and ask some questions that did come up during the presentation. And just as a reminder, if you have not already done so, we ask that you type your questions into the Q&A box in your control panel. So one of the first questions that came up is, can HACTool assess dust hazards in addition to flammable gas and or liquid hazards?
Right, so question being, can HACTool handle the dust side of things? And so right now, HACTool is capable of the flammable and combustible dusts and liquids, and we're working on the development of the dust side of things. So that was the NFPA 499 that was kind of referenced as a future development. You may have seen some of the underlying workings there in the software. You do have the ability to select a class 2 area, which indicates a dust hazard. But the functionality to overlay a dust area, to calculate a dust area, and check for electrical compliance is not in the software as of today, but that is the first item on the thing that we're looking at adding on that future improvements list.
Great, thank you for that. Another question, can HACTool assess locations within buildings?
Right, so locations within buildings. So talked a little bit about that, but I think we didn't showcase, putting a point release source in a building. So I can see that question coming up. HACTool it will check to make sure that the release source is either in an open field or not in a building, or if it's in a building. If you recall, one of the inputs is where's the exhaust location of that release source? Is it a building or open air? And so HACTool will check to make sure it's in a building or not. And then if it's in a building, it'll use some of those inputs such as the vapor tight walls, the ventilation, pressurization, etc. It'll check those boxes and it'll include that in the classification contour that is drawn at the end of the day. So inadequate ventilation leading to a Div 1 area in the building would be something that HACTool is capable of. And then a release starting indoors and migrating outdoors. That is something that HACTool is capable of based on that vapor tight parameter, ventilation parameters that the user defines in that building input screen. So it does have the ability to look at that and consider that in regards to generating those classified areas.
Perfect. And this is going to be the last question before we conclude the presentation. So is there any sort of technical help that is included in the cost of the software?
Right. Yeah. So we talked about additional resources outside of the software for HAC, but in terms of the software itself, there are a few things that will be released whenever you download the license for the HACTool software, and those include one, a user guide. So I didn't click on the user guide button, but there is a user guide that takes you through all the inputs, and you can read about which input is specific for what outputs, and it kind of walks you through the process of building your HACTool file. So there's a user guide if you like the textual side of things. And then there's also a training video. So there's about, I think it's over 2 hours. There's a training video where you can listen to me talk even longer about HACTool specifics and really get down into the weeds of each input, how to populate it, and such that you can calculate your reports at the end of the day. So you've got the user guide, you've got that training video, and then for the different licensing packages based on 3 months or 12 months, there's also an additional 1 or 2 hours of time if you want to meet with us. If you're really trying to do some specific modeling, there's an hour or two based on the license package that you choose, such that you can meet with us, the developers, ask your questions. We can help you model those situations as they come up. So those are the three main resources outside of the resources that were shared and presented on the previous slide.
Perfect. Well, thank you for answering those questions, Stuart. And we want to say thank you to everyone who joined us today. And if you have additional questions, we ask that you reach out to Stuart directly. And then as a final reminder, today's webinar will be posted to our BakerRisk website. And once the recording is available, you will receive an email from BakerRisk with that link. Finally, we ask that you complete the survey at the conclusion of this webinar. So thanks again for joining us. And thank you so much, Stuart, for your presentation. It was wonderful.
Thank you all.